All right, I'm going to go ahead and call public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present, and we did hold a meeting last week. Can I get approval of those minutes, please? All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right. We have two new pieces in front of us. Our first piece, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purpose of miscellaneous materials and services needed by the Department of Public Safety and for a period of time not to exceed 3 years, approving the specifications, therefore, and declare an emergency. And we have Steve Fricker with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an annual piece of legislation that we do. There are 3 purchasing-related ordinances that we pass each year. There's what we call the safety bid ordinance, and then there's which are items that will be bid out as needed, but will not need specific legislation for each piece. That's why we bring them on this kind of consolidated piece of legislation. And then there's also a non-safety bid ordinance, and then there's a non-safety no-bid ordinance. Those will be coming shortly in the next couple weeks before the end of the year. So on this particular ordinance, we list the estimated quantities of each item that will be needed, and we separate those out by the various divisions within safety. So communications, police, fire, traffic engineering, and I believe, well, those are it, yeah.
All right, good, thanks. We'll see if we have any questions for you. Any questions, committee members? No? No questions. Wow, you're getting off easy today. All right, what's your time on this?
Consent would be fine.
Consent. Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll put that on the consent agenda.
Thank
Steve,
you.
thank you. I appreciate it. All right, thanks, everyone. All right, moving on to our next piece. Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Interval Brotherhood Home to provide comprehensive residential drug and alcohol treatment to eligible individuals and declare an emergency. And we have Sean Volman from our City Law Department with us today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Stand before you today with the legislation we do annually for the Interval Brotherhood Home for confinement and alcohol rehabilitation for offenders in our municipal courts. I have Deborah Foster Cook, who's the executive director of Interval Brotherhood Home, here to answer any questions or talk about the program. We are it's the same dollar figure as last year.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
But I think she has some handouts.
Okay. And if they don't mind, I would love to hear from them for 2 or 3 minutes if they have anything to speak about. If they want to speak for a couple minutes, please do. I would love to hear from them.
I'm Deborah Foster Coke, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you today. Our residents are generally with us from between 60 and 90 days, and during that time they are getting individual counseling, group counseling, a lot of education about the disease of addiction, and a lot of training and support in developing a personal program of recovery, which really includes the spiritual component of recovery. I'd be happy to, I'm passing out or having passed out a whole bunch of statistics at this point, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. I appreciate it.
Hi.
Thank you. We'll see if any committee members or any council members have any questions. Do we have any questions from the committee members? Or Deborah? No? All right, any council members? Chambers? Okay, Madam President, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I also believe, and I don't think it's been eliminated, you also work with the families. So not only
Yes.
are you working with the clients, but you build up a relationship with the families that you also help educate them. Would that be correct?
Yes, ma'am. We do family education on Sundays, and then we have supervised visitation after that. We also do family counseling with the families. And our clients, after they've been in treatment for probably about 45 days, start doing home passes. And when they come back from those visits home, we process the visits with them and talk through, like any temptations they might have faced or any problems at home.
Are you finding now, is it okay, Mr. Chair, if I ask one more question?
Absolutely, go ahead,
I didn't expect to see a statistic here, but are you finding now with the uptick that we have in addiction that families are getting a bit more involved than maybe in the past?
Well, one of the things that we're really finding is that there's such a generational component to addiction. So I was actually with IBH from 1985 to 1996, and unfortunately, I'm seeing the children and grandchildren of some people I had in treatment, 30 and 20 years ago. We also have some people who, when they're in treatment with us, have family members who want to bring them drugs in treatment because the family member feels so bad that they're in treatment with no drugs. And we've had people who have wanted to go home to prepare syringes for family members because they're afraid the person is going to nod out after they've used and not have anybody there to kind of watch to make sure they're still breathing. So we have some very sincere, supportive family members, and then we have family members who are just as deeply into their addictions as the people we have in treatment. So therefore, it's really important for the people we have in treatment to leave with a really solid program of recovery and relapse prevention.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the work that is being done and continues to be done out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Any other questions? Mrs. Sims, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope at some later date we may have an opportunity to bring you back to talk a little more about the service that you provide.
I'd love to.
I would
Yeah.
appreciate that greatly. So what's the average cost per individual that you serve? It seems like there's varying degrees of days they stay. So what's the average
Well,
cost?
our per diem is almost $216 per day.
Okay.
So we generally have them with us 60 to 90 days, and one recent average I saw was about $76,000.
So just one quick, there's one category that talks about discharge against the staff's advice.
That means that the person has elected to leave treatment despite our best efforts to get them to stay.
And they would have been there, what's the average stay for those individuals? They would have been there maybe 30 days?
Well, it depends on whether they're coming through the Akron Drug Court or whether they've been there, referred by someone else. Typically, the people who have come through the Akron Drug Court have been there a little bit shorter time than the people who came through other referrals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sims. Rich, and then I'll go to Linda.
Just, could you talk a little bit about when you have, in the very first page here, percentage of successful discharges actually in the last year has gone down a little bit, not a lot, but from 71% to 64%. What do you consider a successful discharge?
A successful discharge is when a person has worked toward all of the goals in their treatment plan, including getting that personal recovery program put together. And they also might be addressing issues like how their depression affects their addiction and how their addiction affects their depression, might be working through some of their child care issues and child custody issues. Everybody's treatment plan is different. We saw a slight downturn in the numbers when we opened the 20 additional beds late last year. And even though we've got our male residents divided into 2 different houses at this point, just by virtue of the fact that we've got more people on property, there's more problems.
Okay, because it also shows units of service bed days from 1,000 down to 474. Could you
Well,
Not sure what
the
that is.
474 is from July 1 to October 31st. Okay, so that's part of that, so it's not apples to oranges or apples to
Okay.
apples, it's apples to oranges. The other thing is, we're taking referrals from the Akron Drug Court, so if they don't have people who are, who really need a residential level of care, we're not getting them.
Yeah, it must be very, very difficult to, you, on your post-treatment status, talk about, there are some statistics here to show success. No use in the last 30 days, 80%, 88%.
Yeah, we're dealing with a really mobile group of people, as you probably know. Like today's address and today's cell phone number may not be the same as, what it is tomorrow. So we keep track of them as best we can. We have an aftercare program that is completely free to the participants. It's called the IBH Reach Project. It offers volunteer activities, and it also just offers people a chance to be together and appreciate one another's company and have fun with one another. So that's something we give them to try to help them stay sober after they leave treatment, and it's also how we kind of keep track of them. So if you look at some of the statistics at the front end, 2 of the people coming through the drug court had any kind of employment when they came into IBH, and 30 days after they left treatment, which you can see on the back page, 5 of 8 people at 30 days after discharge had full or part-time employment, and 4 people actually had full or part-time employment of the people that we were able to find and survey. So it was 100% of the people we were able to find and survey.
No further, just really appreciate how thorough your tracking is and how comprehensive the services are.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rich, I appreciate that. I know Mrs. Amobian had a question. You still have a question?
Hi, Deborah. Just curious about, I'm looking on page 4, where, and I don't know if this is reflective of what is happening. I know that there's a lot of focus on opiates and heroin and all that. What about the cocaine crack problem? Has it gone down or up or been maintained or what?
Well, these are what people are telling us are their drug of choice.
Okay.
And unfortunately, most of the people in the room already know this. The people who are addicted to heroin are using everything they can get their hands on as well. So this just reflects drug of choice.
And page 1, these are the number of employment staff you have, or these are individuals that, these are the individuals whether they were full-time employed or part-time?
Right, when they were coming in.
What size is your staff?
We have about 100 people on the payroll right now. It's split about half and half between full-time and part-time.
Okay. I can't imagine the stress that this epidemic has put on your staff. Are you finding much turnover in your staff as a result of all this work?
Some turnover, but what we're really trying to do right now is support people. So about 2 weeks ago, we had a special program led by 2 hospital chaplains, to talk about grief and loss and finding the hope in, everything that people are dealing with. And we're going to set up a crisis team, when somebody passes, to help people deal when someone passes away.
And my last question, Mr. Chair, the number of deaths, do you keep track of those as best you can?
Well, I know we've got a whole file folder of obituaries, and we talk amongst ourselves, but I don't think we've ever totaled up how many deaths there have actually been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Sean?
Consent agenda is fine.
That's
Motion
fine. We have a motion from Mr. Swirsky and a second from Mrs. Sims. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. And Deborah, thank you for all the information, especially the handout. It's very important. I also want to acknowledge that we had our city prosecutor and our chief, Ball, and Captain Shanae in attendance, and a few other members from Akron Fire and Akron Police. So with that, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Public utilities will start in 3 minutes. Public utilities will start in 3 minutes. The order.
Sit down there, because I think Swartzky was sitting there.
Thank you. That we will have to take time. Okay, I'd like to call Public Utilities meeting to order. I'd like to make note that all members are present except for Councilman Freeman. If I can get an approval, please, on our last meeting's minutes.
Motion to approve?
Okay, been moved and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so motion carries. Okay, we have one piece on the old agenda, and we'll continue to take time on that. And we have one new piece, and this is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract or contracts for the sale of trees on the properties in Geauga County and declaring an emergency. And we have with us Mr. Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Glocheski will give us a brief explanation of this ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city had a forestry program until about the mid-80s that we managed internally. It was a way that the city could manage some of the watershed properties, but also come up with a little bit of revenue to bring into the city. When we had the large amount of retirements back with the voluntary separation plan, we lost a lot of knowledge, and what we tried to do in the Water Bureau was pull all of our old reports together to kind of get caught back up. And something that came out of that exercise was that the city had a forestry program and had used it with no negative impact to water quality to make a little bit of revenue for the city. So we looked into that, and basically what we're doing today is asking for permission to put out one parcel up at Ladue Reservoir for bid for a sustainable forestry harvest. Just to see how that would go, I've given you the proposal here for your review there. We would hope to, out of this, develop a forestry management program that would look at the entire watershed and look at different opportunities for timber harvesting, but also for forestry management within watershed properties for the city of Akron.
Okay, thank you. One parcel, what's the size of one parcel?
This parcel in particular is a 53-acre parcel, and we're looking at roughly 42 acres of that 53-acre parcel for harvest.
Okay. And how many parcels are out there in total?
I don't know how many parcels off the top of my head, but we have about 16,000 acres that not all of it is forested, but a good portion of it is.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members of committee? Mr. Swirsky?
How many trees are we talking about in the pilot program?
In this particular case, we are talking 417 trees.
And what kind of trees are they?
It's a mix of different types of trees, and I have provided this, and I will make sure that you get a copy of it. We have the exact count and number, but the majority of them, red maple, red oak, yellow poplar, black cherry, ash, and there are some other trees on there. And by no means are we, this will not be a clear cut. This will be a very minimal, very reserved harvest. We want the smallest amount of impact possible on this while still hopefully making some money.
Okay, so after they cut them down, what are they going to do to replace them? Or
So because we aren't removing a lot of trees from the property, a lot of trees will still be there. The way that the trees have been selected as well is to make sure that you're not leaving a giant gap in any particular place. So the trees that are younger that exist on the property already will hopefully become mature trees that in 40 or 50 years will be ready to harvest again.
Who is the forester?
Right now, we're working with Dan Castellucci out of Frontier Woodland Services. Frontier Woodland Services.
Okay, so experienced
Yes, yes, he's an experienced...
professional organization that has done this. Are there other cities? Are we unusual in that we've done a lot of forestry around our water supply? Is that, or are there other cities that have done this?
When we were looking into this, we talked a lot with Muskingum in central Ohio. They do this a lot, and actually that's where we were put into contact with. He had done a lot of the Muskingum projects and their forestry programming.
Okay, he didn't grow up in North Hill or something?
I'm sorry, what?
He didn't grow up in North Hill or?
Of course he did, he's Italian.
Any questions from any other members of committee or members of council? Ms. Amobian?
This may be written somewhere, but how much do you anticipate making? And you earn the money by selling wood from the trees, or how?
Yes, so the forester and the price on the timber can vary based on market value at the time that it's harvested. If this is approved, then we would have the bid go out, but then there's a whole year that whoever won that bid would have the opportunity for any time within the next year to go and harvest. So roughly $50,000 to $70,000 based on the trees that are marked, those 417, which is roughly about 10 trees per acre. Yeah, and so the money comes from those foresters or those loggers who come out, they buy the actual trees, they take them off site and then process them into lumber or veneer or whatever.
Any other questions?
Just, there's a reference to the bidders operating using city guidelines.
Mm-hmm. So within that, basically, anything that law would determine as far as, hiring out, that kind of thing. Those particular details that, insurance and that kind of.
Oh, you're talking about those kinds of professional practices.
Mm-hmm, yes.
Is this somehow tying with our tree plan in any way? Could we, any of that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were. I was just kidding. You were.
Oh.
Go ahead and finish.
Well, I'm asking that.
Okay, so we do have a tree planting program actually within the watershed as well. We plant between 3,000 and 4,000 trees, saplings every year. So, and we've done that since 2011 as a separate program from this. And we tried to plant trees that we feel will have value for the city in 30, 40, 50 years, as well as having value for water quality. So we will continue having the tree planting program. This is a well-forested area, so, even if we did go in and plant saplings, there's already a lot of trees, younger trees and older trees that will still remain on this property that would actually probably outcompete any saplings that we would plant there.
Okay.
By all means, though, we could consider planting trees in that area.
Okay, and it says we're going to manage and oversee the timber company. Mm-hmm. So who's that? The service department or who?
It would be the watershed division. We have the water protection
supervisor. Are you the watershed division?
Yes, yes. Yes, so my staff and I, yes.
I think the last time you had won some awards for the city. Is that correct? For water, I forgot what the awards you...
We recently received a grant to look at beneficially reusing the sludge, the waste product from the water treatment, to try and catch phosphorus.
Okay, so You have a strong environmental track record.
I've got a lot of things going on.
And we have a lot of things going on. Yeah, I see it on the top of your head.
Okay, Mr. Fusco?
Thank you, Chairman. So I think you alluded to it. Should you be replacing these, that's what's going to happen to the land area once it's cleaned, I guess, for lack of a better term, or once it's timbered?
Well, we're not going to clear cut. If you take a whole acre and we only take 10 trees off an acre, we're not clear cutting anything. I mean, you probably wouldn't even notice that we took these 10 trees off an acre. Gotcha. You can imagine an acre size and we remove 10 trees, that would be a very, very minimal amount. You wouldn't even know it. So.
When we visited Muskingum, we did go into some of these that he had just, the forester I alluded to, Mr. Castellucci, had within the last year had a harvest. And, other than, oh, hey, here's a stump, it was very, it looked relatively undisturbed. They did have to put a road back to get access to some of that equipment. But other than that, the disturbance is really minimal on these kinds of projects.
Good. So they're responsible for the entire cleanup and everything.
Yes.
Everything's going to be
They
removed.
put it back the way they found it.
All spoils, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Just for my edification down the road, be interesting to find out when you mentioned black cherry and you mentioned the oak, probably because those are the ones I'm familiar with, I would think those have some of the higher value. But it would be good to know which trees have the higher value and which ones give us the best environmental impact. So in the future, we concentrate on planting those for two reasons. One, because they help sustain, I know this is a concern of Mr. Swirsky's, help protect the watershed area. But the other thing is, when you say 16,000 acres, and I'm looking at this number times 16,000, if the market would bear just taking 10 trees off of each one, that can help with a lot of our cash flow problems. Again, I don't know if the market could bear that, but it would be good to know so that in the future when we're planting trees that have the greatest return value for us.
Yeah, Davey Tree has a program online that is a free program that kind of values what different species of trees and different ages and all that, what that value of that timber would be, or what the value environmentally of those trees are. And it does vary year to year even. But we've used that, and we've used advice from other forestry programs in determining which trees that we purchase those seedlings to make sure that we're planting something that will continue to support and give value back to the city.
Okay, thank you. So if there aren't any other questions, I believe you did say that consent would be fine.
Motion for consent.
If I can have a second, please. Okay, the motion is second. If there isn't any further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Oh. Excuse me, Mr. Luttle, I do want to ask one thing before we close out the meeting. And I know Mr. Moore was the one who said this, and you had given me some information. If we can have an update, since we're getting ready to prepare to go into the budget process, on where we are in analyzing the possibility of using the program that Stowe used, where they worked with the special needs children in regards to painting their fire hydrants. And I know you gave me a report on what it would cost. When that information regarding where we are in that process and evaluating that, if we can also just make the presentation of the information you gave to me on the cost difference of having a professional company and just citizens paint as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now with that, thank you, sir. If there's anything else to come before us, motion to adjourn?
Okay. Second.
Thank you.